Attention, attention. His Eminence, the Imperious Leader, will be with us shortly.
Hello everyone, my name is Sam. And I'm Austin. You haven't seen me a lot before, but I'm one of the producers for Geeking Out About It, and I'm going to be around a lot more now. Yeah, we figured we should bring out the big gun if we're going to be talking about some of these more interesting topics that really only me and you know a lot about.
Niche topics, I think, is more specific.
Niche is probably the more specific term, because this week we're talking about Battlestar Galactica. Yes, our dad made sure that when we were growing up, we saw the original 1978 Battlestar Galactica in full. In fact, we had a box set with a set of a Cylon. It was so cool.
It's actually really enjoyable.
And we have seen the newer 2004 version of Battlestar Galactica as well, so we're actually the only ones in the house who can talk about this great series. Yeah, and it's something that I've always liked. It's really interesting. The show itself has a very unique story to it. I mean, it's very bare bones, at least the 1978 version, but the 2004 version
is super intricate. Actually, a lot of people consider the 2004 version of Battlestar Galactica to be one of the best reboots of a science fiction property ever done, and I understand where they're coming from. I still personally prefer the 1978, mostly because I grew up with it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But the 2004 one is actually an excellent representation of what Battlestar was trying to do in the first time around, and it gives it way more intricate storytelling as well.
Yeah, it takes a large enough shift where it doesn't feel the same as the original. In the original, they used like laser guns and a bunch of these like really like spacey type things, you know, just like kind of fantasy, more leaning towards what Star Wars was. But in the 2004, it's a little bit darker and more like realistic almost.
Yeah, everything's a lot more complicated in the 2004 one, and a lot more down to earth as well. No pun intended. Spoilers for the...
Anyway, spoilers.
The 1978 one was actually, it was right after the wake of Star Wars, so they were doing their best to emulate Star Wars. They had, everything was done with lasers, everything was done with energy weapons, it was all meant to be space. And it was gritty, but it was space. And the story was super simple as well. The premise of the original 1978 Battlestar Galactica is that there's this system of human republics, I'm going to call them. They're called colonies.
Yeah, the colonies.
I don't know why, because there's no overarching thing that's made the colonies, but they're called colonies.
Because it sounds
and
cool.
They
and
are
it's American.
opposed. Yeah, they are. And they are opposed to this empire of robots, artificial humanoids called Cylons. There was this war. They were fighting the war for a long time. They decided that now is a good time to stop the war. There's been a lot of casualties. So they go to a peace conference to end the war. And then the Cylons ambush the fleet at the peace conference and send weapons of mass destruction around and destroy all 12 of the human colonies and wipe out every piece of military from the colonies except for one warship, the Battlestar Galactica.
Join the last remnants of the human race in the quest for a new world.
That warship then gathers together all of the civilian vessels that it can scrape up and puts as many refugees onto them as it possibly can and starts just out on a journey into space, a space epic, trying to find the long-lost 13th colony, which is later revealed to be Earth.
Yeah, it's a really interesting show, and it does have some complex natures in it. While it is kind of like a basic, simple story where they take on a new challenge each time, it's all in that effort to try and get to this 13th colony. Now, there is some pretty dark themes throughout the show, especially when we're talking about Baltar, because Baltar is this guy who betrayed the colonies, essentially.
Yeah, he was the one who sold them out to the Cylons in the first place, and after the first arc of the original Battlestar Galactica, he ends up sort of ruling a subsect of the Cylon government, and it's him who's continuing to chase the Battlestar Galactica and its refugee fleet to try and exterminate them, despite the fact that the new Cylon Emperor doesn't want to do it anymore. So it does get a little bit infighty.
Yeah, it's really messed up.
But it's nowhere near as dark as the new version.
Yeah,
the 2004 one, way more intricate, way darker, and we're not going to talk too much about the plot for that one because we actually do recommend that you watch it for yourselves. It's really enjoyable to get through. I don't feel like we're spoiling the 1978 one though, because it's pretty straightforward. If you know anything about storytelling, it's really easy to tell what the arc's going to be.
For me, it's the kind of the same thing. Like if you haven't seen the original trilogy of Star Wars before, then too bad. Now you get it all spoiled for you. This is from 1978. Too bad. Now it's spoiled for you.
Yeah, it's been quite a while for that one, and it was written in 1978 too, so it's super simple. The other stuff that happens in the differences between the 1978 version and the 2004 version of Battlestar Galactica, we were talking about how that one was based on lasers and super space fantasy. The 2004 is a lot grittier, not just in the storytelling and the plot intricacies, but the way that they actually operate in their space combat. Everything is done with ballistic weapons. They've got missiles all over the place. They still use nuclear weapons for a lot of stuff, but it's all done super realistically. So the Battlestar Galactica is this heavily armored shell of a ship, and it's just firing off a bunch of miniguns trying to intercept all of the enemy munitions with basically sea whiz. So shooting down missiles. The fighters are out there trying to intercept missiles and fight the other fighters and worry about getting missiles into the right positions. And it's actually just super messy, gritty combat compared to the other one, which is, swooping laser fire.
Yeah, there's a difference in the way that they were made. So in 1978, they could only use what they really had, which was a lot of interesting practical effects. So they had to conserve the budget almost, and they had to use the same shots over and over again.
Well, yeah, because everything
so
was done.
Combat was simple.
Everything was done with practical models and a big camera rig that was able to repeat its movements like what they were doing with Star Wars.
Yeah.
But it's all done with these very intricate, very expensive practical models, which means making science fiction special effects shots, like space combat shots, is incredibly difficult. When you make a fighter go, that shot took you a couple days and a lot of model work. And if you blow that thing up at the end, you only get one try at it, or you're going to have to spend another, $1,000 on a model.
Yeah, and Battlestar had this very interesting thing where they wanted to blow stuff up. They wanted it to have that kind of experience, so it was different from the way that Star Trek shot things back then, which was they were like, we have this precious model, just call it shields and we'll be fine.
Yeah, no one wants to take a
In
zipper
this
line
one,
to their
they don't
precious
have shields, so they just blow up stuff. So they can only use the same shots over and over again, so they just have one ship blowing up every once in a while, one ship flying like this every once in a while.
Yeah, but they have lots of space combat. And in order to make up for the discrepancy between amount of space combat they could actually afford to shoot and amount of space combat they wanted in the show, they reused all of their shots.
Just throw a different background in there.
And over again. This ship goes, and then like a few minutes later, it's the same one again. It's literally the same shot, the same Viper flying the same path. Maybe they changed the background out. Maybe they added another one over here somewhere. But
there's this sequence where you can see a whole bunch of Vipers flying at the screen, and then they're flying from a planet, and then like 3 seconds later, they show the exact same shot, but now it's a starry background.
Yeah,
so they just
it's the same one.
footage.
It's the same shot again.
They're
all
far
moved exactly the same.
It's far different from how they did the 2004 version, which was with CGI and a higher budget.
The new one,
stuff like that.
The 2004 had all CGI everything because it was made in 2004. They had the technology available. Unfortunately, they did have only 2004 graphics, so even though they had a really high budget to make this new series of Battlestar, they still had to skimp a little bit here and there on their modeling and their rendering of all of this stuff.
And it was a sci-fi show.
What happens is you get a lot of mess. You get a lot of just random noise generation for explosions. You get a lot of just bullets are flying everywhere and you can't really see. And the other thing that they did to compensate for it is classic 2004 camera work. Everything is just... it's actually one of the main reasons why I prefer the old one, actually.
Yeah.
I get nauseated watching the new one.
It's really disorienting watching some of these combat things. I mean, sure, that can be like a thing, it's war, so you're getting disoriented throughout it.
It looks exactly the same as the camera work they were doing with Firefly, which interestingly was made about the same time.
Yeah, and I'm not a big fan of the shaky, disorienting cam. Well, there are some cool shots in there, but all the cool shots are when the camera's stable. The camera's stable
those are
on
great.
something.
I actually really enjoy the old shots where you can see everything in clean detail because the camera's not throwing you over there and back. And they're zooming in from really far away with these camera angles that nobody understands.
One thing that I think wasn't done as well, just personally, this is my own taste, is that in the original they had the Cylons that were very cool to look at.
Yeah.
They had a motivation that was kind of interesting. The Cylons were like eradicators almost. But in the new series they kind of mixed it up. And they had humans that were also Cylons, or Cylons that look like humans.
I wasn't as big of a fan of the Cylons that look like humans. I will admit, I'm not. It led to really good story arcs in the show.
Sure.
I just didn't really appreciate it as a development for the Cylons compared to old Cylons. They were simple bad guys. The old Cylons.
Yeah.
There's the robots. They want to exterminate all of the humans. There was this conflict back in the day, and they're going to keep doing it now. And that was super easy. Most of them were drones. They didn't really do much other than follow the commander's orders. I actually really appreciated them, although the new ones get characters all of their own. Mm-hmm. Most of the Cylons are still sort of drones that just do stuff, but there's a lot of them now that have personalities.
Yeah,
and the drones still exist.
Yeah.
The old Cylons are still in the new Battlestar. It's actually one of the really cool things.
Yeah,
they're a sub race of the Cylons. They end up rebelling. It's this whole cool arc. I won't spoil it, but it's really fun.
Yeah. Well, anyways, that is all the time that we have for talking about.
I would talk about this for a very long time. I could probably talk for another half an hour, but we want to keep these short and sweet. And we hope you appreciate that we're swapping up the teams, and I hope you liked hearing me talk, because I'm probably going to be back a lot soon. And that's all we really have time for tonight's episode.
Yeah, if you have a topic that you want us to talk about, let us know in the comments down below, and we'll try to get it in there. For all, that's it. Good night, everyone.
Good night.